God would witness during the sun's position at a particular spot in the heaven or firmament during a particular part of the day, that the sun will cause the tree, one of the fruit trees, to cast its shadow to, let's say, a rock around 50 yards to the right hand side of God. Now, at another position of the sun during the day, the sun may cause that same fruit tree to cast its shadow directly upon God, centered with the tree. And then later during that day, the sun's position may cause the tree to cast its shadow to the riverbank, about 50 yards to the left-hand side of God. This is how we calculate time for days. And the shadow will shift periodically, and by each repetitive shadow position and by each repetitive shadow shift, we are able to measure seasons and years. Now, so far, we can infer, since we have begun this study, that in the creation process, God is creating as He goes, bringing things to fruition as He wills it in the moment. And not only that, but He also gives certain things titles, such as the heaven, the earth, and the seas. And He also is using some things to aid Him in His creation, of which He already knew prior to the beginning of creation, such as light and time. Now let's look at verse 15, which says, "And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth." And it was so. Now, not only were the lights meant for signs and seasons and days and years, but also they were meant to give light upon the earth. This could be the moment referred to in verse 3, where it was stated, God said, "Let there be light." So if we take this as verse 3 in and of itself, we can infer that verse 3 covers the remaining portion of this topic, covering the portion of verses from verse 14 to verse 19. Now, by inferring the idea that verse 3 of Genesis refers strictly to verses 14 through 19 of Genesis, then we can also infer that verse 1, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," refers to the entirety of this topic, the creation of the universe. But before we jump the gun, let's continue with the remaining portions of the creation of the universe. Let's continue with verse 16. "And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also." Here we can infer that the greater light of the day is none other than the sun, and that the lesser light of the night is none other than the moon. And also, God created the stars. Verse 17 follows up by saying, "And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." So here we see that God set the sun, the moon, and the stars in the heaven as a means of giving light upon the earth. He positioned them to the way of which they should be. And here we have verse 18, which states, "And to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, and God saw that it was good. So we can see that with verse 17 and 18 we have here a twofer. The two verses combined can create one solid verse, wherein 17 says, "And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And verse 18 follows by saying, "And to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good." Now we can infer that not only did verse 3 of Genesis sum up verses 14 through 19, but that also verses 3 and 4, well, let's throw in verse 5 in there as well. Together, these three verses sum up the verses of 14 through 18. But lastly, let's look at verse 19. "And the evening and the morning were the fourth day." But wait a minute. Didn't I just infer that verse 3, 4, and 5 referred to verses 14 through 18 and 19? But yet it says here, the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Well, that doesn't line up with verse 5, where it says the evening and the morning were the first day. How can this be? There's got to be some sort of explanation to this. And here's the explanation. Without the lights, the sun, the moon, and the stars, to give time in an earthly manner, then there would have been no days to count by. Ergo, the first day refers to the first cycle of the sun. The evening and the morning were the first day, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So the fourth day was actually the first day of the sun's rotation, and therefore the first day of creation. Now, what does this say about the previous inference that verse 1 of Genesis refers to verses 2 through 13? That on the first day the earth made its first revolution. Now, on the second day of the earth's creation, the sun, having evaporated the water which was below the firmament to the above the firmament position, creating the firmament itself, which we know as the atmosphere, that this event occurred on the second day, the earth's second revolution. Now, during the third revolution of the earth, the third day, the land began to dry due to the sun and the moon and the stars. And because of this, we find that God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters called he seas. Now this is the third day, and it was very good. And also, on the third day, as the land began to dry, it began to bring forth grass, and herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind. In the evening and the morning were the third day, the third revolution. So now let's look at verse 1 all over again with understanding. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. He done so simultaneously, or at the very least within a close time proximity of each other. They were created both in the same moment, or at least close enough. And from that moment forward, motion was put into place. And God saw that it was good. And this was the creation of the universe. According, word from word, to the King James Version of the Holy Bible.